It's drag racing this Friday night under the lights at fabulous Carlsbad Raceway.
The spectacular 200-mile-per-hour nitro-fuel dragster competition, highlighting another action-packed Friday night of drag racing at beautiful Carlsbad Raceway.
The big Friday night drag racing season swings into high gear when Ford, Chevrolet, Pontiac, Dodge, and Plymouth meet heads up in a devastating final for drag racing supremacy.
Plus lightning-fast Altereds and Roadsters, high-winding Gassers, and the 7-second tire-smoking supercharged dragsters racing side by side at supersonic speeds in the big go for top eliminator.
Beautiful Carlsbad Raceway is located 7 miles east of Highway 101 on Palomar Airport Road, north of San Diego.
Final eliminations, 8 p.m.
Friday night at fabulous Carlsbad Raceway.
Be there.
I says, without advertising.
Wow.
I says, without advertising. So he said, really? I says, yeah. So Gary said, what's the bottom line here? So I gave him a number. And I think it was, oh shit, well over 300 grand just for the tooling.
Mm-hmm.
Just for the tooling. And he says, so he says, okay, I'm come back. He went around, he took some pictures of what we had and shelves and all this stuff. So then Gary had a friend who did his engines for him. And the guy was a crew chief on an offshore race boat team. And they had multiple engines in each boat. Mm-hmm. And they were sponsored by a vodka company. And they were stationed out of Florida. And
Some big money racing there.
yeah, so anyway, so they both came out. Gary and his motor guy came out and looked the stuff over and asked me a lot of questions about what we had and how it worked with what we were selling and all that, so they would have an understanding. And I told them about the head studs, and I showed them what we had in the blocks as to how we marked the sleeves, because the sleeves all had notches in them for the various head studs, because we used a large flange outer sleeve. And so number 1 and number 8 were identical sleeves, and you know, we went on and showed them how, so we had double of each number, but they were all fitting in different holes based on the notches in the block for the head studs. So that's how we aligned all that up. So once they got a handle on that, I gave them the chart of every head that was done, the thicknesses of each of the tooling for each pattern thickness. What, like if you wanted an A block, which was a 9/8 deck with an E deck on it, it was maybe so many thousand sticker in some manner.
True custom engine.
You could, oh, they were true, without question.
Yeah.
Well, I had to know all of that.
Yeah.
So the result was, that's what I did know.
Blocking the block.
Yeah. So how many castings you want of this number, how many castings you want on that number, what decks do you want on them, how thick you want the deck, yada, 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 yada. So that's how it all is. Because it wasn't all Hemi Chevy. It was all anything you wanted to make. If you wanted a strong deck, you put an extra thick deck on it, smaller water jacket. See, you had to do all that. So that's what we did. I was in charge of all of that shit. So it's just all of that kind of what it was. So I approached the old man and I says, well, I got somebody that's interested in possibly wanting to buy this deal. What are your thoughts? Well, I don't know. He says, yeah, let's see what they say. So I said, well, here's what I presented to them. Here I got the inventory sheet, and I had every sleeve and stud listed
Mm-hmm.
everything that we put into these blocks. I mean, we had a kit that we sold, and the kit for the block was the soft plugs, which were threaded plugs, the oil galley plugs, anything that required the block being complete. And all the main caps were all drilled properly for the internal oil pump and all that stuff. And all the head studs were the same, with the exception of one. 19 were all the same length, and number 20 was a short one because it went on the passenger side at the upper portion of the block. It was a shorter one because it would go into the distributor if it was not shorter. So it was machined accordingly. But they were all basically ½ in the block, basically all of that. But 7/16 through whatever custom head you wanted, unless you had an Arias head, then it was half all the way through. But they also pulled from the main web was another feature. The stud pulled from the mains. That's how long the stud was. Mm-hmm. So they were over 12 inches long, you know. So they were long studs.
Oh, wow.
for the Hemi Chevy anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then the others weren't so much. They varied as to length because of what application and what head they were using. If they were using a dart head or somebody else's head or whomever. Mm-hmm. You had to package it according to the need,
right? Because
studs came with it, because we knew what they were doing, but it was all part of the package. So that's how that came about. But that was the Hemi Chevy as it was. And when Gary took the thing over, and they came by and picked everything up, and took it all with them, they wanted to renegotiate the deal. He says, well, some of these blocks we can't use. I says, well, what's that mean to me? Are you changing the deal now? He says, no, well, I said, I can't use an 11.7 block. I'll never sell anybody an 11.7. And in fact, I rarely will sell anybody for 11.2. Our stuffs are 10.7s, 10.2s, 9.8s. That's our standard for what we do. I says, well, here's the deal. You buy everything. This is your baby. I says, I'll see what we have left over in blocks, and so maybe we can cut the price down a little bit, but I'm not going to give you the store. I'm selling you the parts at this point at net cost. I said, I'm not making money on the parts, so you got to buy most everything. So we went back and forth a couple of times, but the end result was they bought everything, and I think we only ended up with the 11.7 blocks is what it ended up being. So we cut a deal. The old man wrote a check like it was going to the bathroom.
Wow.
No problem.
So what happened with all the other ones?
So we sold that one off. And so every once in a while I'd get a call. I'd buy a block from them if I had a need for that particular block. But by that time we had it converted over to the race cam. We had gear drive forward. We had everything on our own with our own label on it. And Cassell was the supplier for most of that. But I see Andy every once in a while locally to the car show we have here. He has a couple of cars. He brings his Curtis midget on a trailer once in a while, and he shows it's Ruby's restaurant over here at the Whitwood Mall. Or he'll bring his 46 Ford, which is a primo, beautiful car. I mean, he's kept it brand new. And then he's got a pickup truck. It's just as pretty. Those are his babies. And then since he lost his wife to cancer, like I did, always asks me questions about this and that, and it's hard to be alone for him. But his health is not there anymore, and he's cranky as hell now. I mean, you go over there to his place, he's hard to deal with. But I talk to him, and when I see him at the event, he's kind of sociable, but not. When you go to his place, he's not. He's pretty tough, you know. He's pretty hard to deal with. He's got 2 sons that work with him there at the place, but it's just that. So, but that's pretty much the history of the block. We were buying centripetally spun ductile iron sleeves like they use in racing, basically for that. So we bought that, outsourced that. C's made all the main caps for us and everything.
Darton or LA sleeve?
No, Darton was the player at the time because I had inventory of Darton sleeves, you know. So. What's next on your list here?
Let's see now. The options on the engines, particularly the 8.3, some have the auxiliary gear drive for the pump and the distributor, and some just had nothing, with the distributor in the back.
Yes.
And that was the first ones, I assume?
The ones with the distributor in the back using the Chevy oil pan. The ones with the distributor in the back using the first set of pan rails with the Donovan gear drive on the front. He used the Donovan gears, not necessarily the Donovan gear drive, because the cover itself it was like it had two flanges on the outside,
Yeah,
and then they
nice.
went up and had the gear drive, but it was a raised cam. No, not raised, standard cam is what it was. But it supported the pan rails is what it did. That way you could use a flat pan and not just make it shallow or
Really
whatever
low, yeah.
dimension. So, but basically the first one was using a Chevy pan, and basically the standard Donovan gear drive with a Chevy gear drive on it. Just had a regular
And the oil pump went in the bottom?
inside the pan.
Because I have some shafts and I have some main caps with it. It looked like an oil pump actually went on it.
It did.
So I was trying to figure out if that was a wet sump motor,
Well,
like a dragster pan.
it definitely is a wet sump motor. Absolutely.
Okay.
The pan, basically.
Yes.
But now I have a Hemi Chevy. I run one on my Bonneville car, and I run an outside pump.
Oh, that's right. You had a car for sale.
Yeah.
Is it still for sale? Or?
Oh, I have a dragster for sale.
The dragster.
I got that, but I mean, I have another. This car here I have also.
Oh, okay.
That's my land speed car
Oh,
there.
I see. The one had the Chrisman rear end in it.
Well, I have that car. I have it. I have it still.
Yeah, I had talked to you about that.
Yeah. No, I've got that. That's the one that was modified down there in San Diego.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Now, let me see. And I know some of them I have had both the manifolds, but they actually had a funny car manifold and they had a dragster manifold. One was a little bit taller than the other. Cast mag 8.3.
No,
I just wondered if there was any.
the single one-piece manifolds that were mag were made for the narrow head,
Mm-hmm.
and they were made for 10.2 and 11.2.
Okay.
The fathead used the Hemi Chevy intake manifold and a valley cover.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also used for the 10-liter fathead.
Oh.
And 10-liter had a different valley cover
Oh,
because it had a hump in the middle for the gear drive.
I see. Okay.
I've got them both here, but they're not machined
I've
yet.
seen a picture of one 10-liter. That's all I got. I don't have anything else on it.
Yeah.
It's really. Yeah, I don't. There's one Bill Schultz in and out or over the hill gang.
That's the
car.
8.3 is the very first block that was made, and it has even a provision for a screw-on oil filter.
Mm.
That's the only one. That block split
Mm-hmm.
down the middle in the back there, and Quinn Epperly's the one that welded it all back together, and you'd never know it.
Oh wow.
You'd never know. His workmanship was unbelievable in welding. He was one of the better welders, best welder I ever met.
Wow. Yeah, I saw it in the Pomona Museum, and it's like
Yeah.
it looks the same, but it's not the same.
Mm.
It's completely different.
Yeah.
Did they ever make any 4-valve heads, 3 or 4 valve heads for the
No.
3?
No.
Yeah. And was the original engines wet sumps? I would say yes
Mm-hmm.
at this point. And what kind of oil pumps did they use? Just a regular big block Chevy one, a high volume pump at the time?
Well, several of the aftermarket guys that were like Titan Engineering,
Oh, they had them back then?
because
okay.
he actually started making his own rocker arms, and he had
Yeah.
a lot of 8.3s
They did.
himself.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the fire burned him out. The Santa Barbara fire burned his whole business out. His house, his business, all the engines he had in there, his race car, his everything. He got burned out. The guy that, Scott Sykes of Lansco Engineering, and he were friends, and Scott bought the name of the company and made a deal with him for the purchase of the company of whatever, because they had orders for oil pumps coming out their ears, and
Oh,
he
yeah.
made clutches too.
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
But he made a lot of aluminum rocker arm assemblies,
Mhm.
the billet stuff.
Yeah, no, they were nice. I've seen them.
Yeah, I have some, I don't know if they're his or not, I have a set of intakes.
Yeah.
I never used them for anything.
I always wondered why he made such a one-off piece like that.
He was infatuated with the 8.3 liter engine. Just one of those guys.
Huh.
Yeah, Bob Sanders is a hell of a nice guy, but hell of a loss for what he went through and the whole
that-
deal.
that-
And
I mean, you're done.
Yeah.
What would you do?
yeah,
Yeah. I'm just wondering what caused the evolution of a dual plug. Is that certain people that were buying them from you, the A-Fuel guys or Miller or?
well, that was based around the alcohol back in the early days, and but later they apparently found that it wasn't necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
They let them have a bunch of mags and it didn't seem to matter.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I have billet heads that are dual plug
Mm.
that I had made. But most of what I have now, I never got the tooling to make a dual plug valve cover. I got the tooling, actually I created the tooling for this single plug narrow head and a single plug fat head valve cover.
Okay.
And basically it's very similar to the Hemi Chevy, the 8.3 valve cover, the early one with a 3 push rod. The later one, because of the design of the rocker assembly, had to go to the taller valve cover, which I also had made. But I had a guy do a 3D thing for me and make it, and then I had to have gaskets made because I couldn't get a Hemi Chevy gasket to fit on a valve cover, which is the same narrow head. Well, it's a fat head is what it is. Well, I mean, I just recently went to Seal Methods back to where the areas started when they had gaskets made. They made gaskets for me, but it cost me a chunk of change. They've jacked their prices up so sky high that, but I needed them because I had customers with my new parts with Hemi Chevy, rocker arms and valve covers and all that, plug tubes and everything. And I ended up having to make gaskets for them, and I just recently got the order here as recently as 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
So I just finally got them. It took me 6 months to get them to even talk to me because to them I'm a nobody compared to who they deal with, you know. I'm a little guy. I mean, I don't have that kind of I don't have that kind of money. No.
Wow. Okay. I know a lot of the MBR motors are larger cams, like a 2160, I think they are.
Well, that's been changed by them. Again, the purpose of my getting into what I did with the building of blocks and what have you, I decided to keep it standard because of what was in the original, and there's a lot of original engine parts still out there.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't want to compete with Bob Miner because I couldn't financially anyway. So I just stayed with what is standard diameter Chevrolet dimensioned, using the Chevrolet cam bearings and that type of thing, and that's really what I stayed with. Yeah, I know that there's some fancier ways. I do have one block that's for a 55 millimeter cam, but I did it not thinking initially why I did that, but then it came into play later that well, I should have had a raised cam block in order to do something like that. And so I made one. I have one single unmachined raised cam 8.3 liter block that I haven't machined yet.
Oh, wow.
And I have the right gear. I had the drawings done by Nick Arias III and all the dimensioning, supposedly proper dimensioning for everything. So it requires a raising of the cam 900 thousandths, but it also requires a 41 tooth idler, which is what I also had, which I bought from Carroll Carter because his idler gear is a 41 tooth. So it's identically the same thing. So it's all within the same design family is what it all boils down to. But I moved it up, and I can still use my billet gear drive cover that I also had made by Nachi Contreras. And I just have to machine it and give it some clearance for the gear at the upper portion of the cover. So I'm able to still use that same cover and gear drive.
Wow. How much taller is it came in at 250?
No, I raised the cam 900,000.
900.
Yeah. It's kind of,
That's a raised cam.
well, the thing is, it doesn't fit, nobody knows about it.
Mm.
The bottom line is, if anybody knew about it, they wouldn't allow me to run it probably,
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't fit any of the criteria out there in today's real world.
Mm.
I could,
Push rod's way shorter.
well, no, but it moves it away from the wall, of the lifter bore wall.
Mm-hmm.
It pushes it up. And the angle of the lifters are 54 degrees now. It's not 49 anymore.
Okay. So it's getting like a 10 liter
Pretty close.
without getting.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
See, because that I own all of that. I can do whatever I want. I can just do it all. The 10 liter, I have an arrangement made with the guy who owns the 10 liter. But since he has not made one part since he bought all that stuff, I had ended up making a deal with him to make sure that the tooling was still usable. Keep in mind, when you're dealing with wood tooling,
Oh, yeah.
it sits in an open warehouse, weather affects it. My investment in the tooling of his, not my tooling, his tooling,
Mm-hmm.
has gotten ridiculous where that I made it to where it's still usable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not hundreds, I've got a few thousand invested in that now.
Mm-hmm.
That the block tooling is basically that. And I asked the guy to give me an idea what he wanted to buy it for, or sell it for me,
Mhm.
sell it to me for,
Mm-hmm.
and he's never come up with an agreement. And I says, well, if you sell it to somebody else, I want the rights to sell it, make at least a half a dozen or 25 blocks a run on it
Mm-hmm.
for the money I've got invested in keeping your tooling worthwhile to be used.
Yeah, you'd think he would just let you use it at that point.
Well, the thing is, I make the same head,
Mm.
narrow and fat head. I have the tooling for that because I got that from Fontana. It's the same exact tooling for the 10 liter as it is for the 8.3.
Mm.
The only difference is the angle of the push rod hole. They're
Okay.
the only two differences.
Hmm.
Well, one has a notch in it and one doesn't. One's a solid head. It's, in other words, at the very bottom where between the deck of the block and the upper end of the import side of the block, there's a step inside there. It's a step
Yeah.
for a valley cover or
Mhm.
whatever the deal. Anyway, there's two different styles, and that's what
Hmm.
so I have that head.
Wow. How about your the lifters? For some reason, I have sets of lifters, and they're called high-low lifters, and they say Arias. Crowler sells them, and they actually say high and low, and they actually have two different heights of push rod cups in them. And I have them wrote down at home whatever they were, but I'm just wondering why they went. One was particular for the intake, one was particular for the exhaust. Do you know anything about that, or
Well,
because the push rod rigs are different? We know that.
Well, here's what I do know. I didn't know that was in their inventory, but I do know this, that it has a lot to do with what deck height you're using as to what angle that push rod is
Mhm.
in through the hole in the head.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I know, for example, if you there have been some 12.2 heads made, heads for the 12.2 deck height block head,
Holy crap.
where the whole location is totally different
Oh,
than
yeah,
the
I can see
11.2.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is it changes the angle of everything and it moves it away from certain areas of the block. So I
Mhm.
mean, so what you have may be
Yeah.
for a different application, but I don't recall ever making a 12.2 8.3.
Mm-hmm.
But it might be a lifter. See, Crowler made lifters for both the 10 liter and 8.3. They were the only source for the parts.
That makes sense, because I've been told that you do not grind that push rod hole because it'll make the chambers blow out if we get too thin with a boost. So you gotta make that, even if it rubs, you just leave it alone.
Well, this is how it worked. That's just exactly how it was. keep in mind that you're using a block that was designed for a Chevrolet motor. It's 4840 bore centers. It's a Chevy block, actually. You've modified it to fit the need of a head that never was ever designed to be on that thing.
Oh, so it was originally designed for a Chevy head?
Yes.
Not a Hemi head?
That block was designed for a Chevrolet engine.
Okay.
It was
That makes more sense.
It was not a custom-made block for the 10-liter. The 10-liter is the only custom-made block in the place. The 8.3 was a Chevrolet block. 10-liter is the custom-made block.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, but they kept it the same pan width, the same pan rail design, the same front cover outward design as far as width is concerned. They just enhanced it for the size, for the gear drive, and all of the other stuff that they incorporated in the 10-liter. So there's where the differences in the thing.
So there actually might be some blocks out there that have a Chevy head pattern in them.
Sure.
Wow. I thought mine was the last survivor of all that. And you try and find a 10.7 deck right now for cast. I haven't seen one for sale in 15 years. Yeah, very rare. Mine isn't a perfect engine by any means, but it's
It's what you choose for combination, what you want.
Yeah.
You know, like for example, my Hemi Chevy is a specific combination setup only because of the fact that it has a spec requirement for the class that I run at Bonneville. My motor is a B motor, and it can't be any larger in displacement. Is 439 cubic inch. When it goes to 440, it becomes an A-class motor. So it's a different requirement, different class record, different everything. You can run the same fuel, same whatever. It's just different. So they have different requirements. The chassis is the other part of it. You have special requirements for the tires, special requirements for the driveline, all that stuff. It's all, you know, when you get into the top class, you run what you brung. I mean, you can put 5 engines in it if you want or whatever you want to do, but it's that kind of a deal.
So what size lifters do your engines use? The 904s?
Well, it's the standard. It's the Arias standard. They used a Chrysler lifter.
The Chrysler lifter.
Yeah, is what they used. That was the standard from Crower.
Okay.
They also used a Crower steel I-beam rod is what it was. They had originally the best steel rods around other than Carrillo's, and they improved in size as it went on. You know, I remember Arias sending his rods back to Crower one time, says, I checked these rods out for me, and they said, well, they're old. And he says, well, what's that mean? I want to be sure that they're okay. So they sent them back, says they're all good. And the first thing he does is spin a bearing at Bonneville. I end up having to send a whole rotating assembly to him while they were there overnight. Overnight. Took them 2 days to put another motor back together again with pan rails and everything. And they were running again, you know. But that's what I did when they had their Lakester at that time. So.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard a lot about them stories. You guys had a big block Chevy and old cranks.
Okay. Again, I go back to the 8-liter. The 8-liter had 2 bearing sizes. The bearing size was a 3-inch Oldsmobile bearing rear thrust. Okay. That was one of the 2 sizes. Why that was is because of the splay between the Chrysler ground journal on the crank and the main bearing itself, which was a 3-inch main bearing. The splay was such that it had metal where they would overlap in the stroke, where they would be here. Any smaller bearing would be here, and you'd have a thin space in the crank, and that's where they would break. That's where they would break. So you went to a bigger bearing when you had the bigger displacement motors.
I see.
The 10-liter offered 3 bearing sizes. It had the Chevy, the Olds rear thrust, and the Pontiac 3 1/4 main bearing rear thrust.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so they had 3 because of the strokes, the big strokes. I mean, you wanted when you made a crank, you wanted that crank to have. See, because it had the Chrysler flange, Chrysler journals, whatever main bearing you chose, which was the Chevy Olds or Pontiac, and the Chevrolet front snout, 1/600 diameter snout, double keyed in most cases.
That's what they did in Top Fuel. They went to a 3-inch crank for a while.
Yeah.
And that was the reasoning for it, is the crank was actually stronger.
Yeah. Well, it flexed.
Mm-hmm.
And most recently, when I say recently, the last 30 years, I guess, that they changed the firing order. 4/7 swap.
Yeah.
Why did that do that? Is because how the engine fires with under such load of pop or whatever you put in the damn thing. And so it would, you know, it wouldn't stress the crank, and you'd get more than 2 runs out of it, you know.
Yeah.
So that was the purpose of doing that.
Yeah, they're all like that now too.
Yeah.
And they actually did the other ones. They did a 2, whatever it is.
Well, I made camshafts for the 4/7 swap on the minor brothers. I got some minor brother cams here.
I might have to talk to you about that.
Well, we can do some serious. If you got them, I got them. They're tool steel too. Yeah.
Yeah, I've collected a few. I have some for the other one, and I have some for the other one, so
Yeah.
I have to buy parts twice. Okay, let's see what Steve's got to say here. Steve wants to know, pattern inventory. What do you have patterns for?
Okay. I have the 8.3 pattern. I have the, from the Fontana deal, I have the narrowhead pattern for dual and single plug, cast head. I have, you see, pan rail pattern, but it's kind of a dual pattern for that type of a deal. Let's see, pan rail pattern. Let's see what else. I've got, you know, tooling for the Hemi Chevy head. I got valve cover tooling. 8.3 block, yes. I have. Actually, I use the tooling for the 10 liter. I have that too, but I mean, it's because of the situation I shared with you earlier. And he's lost the tooling for the magnesium blower manifold for the 8.3 liter, which was a combination tool for 10 liter, 8 liter. But the low profile, which was for the 10.2, was one of for the narrow head. The guy that bought the 10 liter took it with him, not knowing it was a dual pattern. And since that time, I've been in touch. It's been maybe 6 years ago. I was in touch with the foundry that had the stuff that he took it to, because he took it out of the pattern company, or the tooling company that had it back east in Ohio. They did magnesium casting, and that was Light Metals Foundry. And then he took it over to, I think, M&S Foundry in Michigan, and I've been calling that number, and they're closed. So that they've lost that tool, and that was the $30,000 tool. It cost 30 grand to make that manifold.
You'd think they'd give somebody a phone call for stuff like that laying around.
Well, I called, and they didn't know what I was talking about until I talked to a certain fella. And once he started talking to me, oh yeah, I remember the deal now. And that was 7 years ago. He says, I'll have to go check it out. I'll get back to you. Never heard from him. And then I called here 2 months ago. Maybe 2 months for sure. No answer. All the numbers I looked at, it's still on. It's still listed as a foundry, but they're not on. They're not there anymore on the computer.
Front cover.
I have the tool for the 10 liter, and then I have a billet cover. The billet cover is. I own the tooling that Nachi Contreras has, but he's the one that does the work. I mean, but I own that.
Manifolds? No.
I have a manifold tool in process. It's at the foundry right now. I'm halfway through it. I've only paid maybe $4,000 or $5,000 on it right now, so still doing that, but it's still.
Wow.
Oh, it's money. This stuff is big money.
Valve covers?
I have for the fathead, and I have also for the narrow head, single plug. It's 10 liter, 8 liter. I have the valley covers, tooling for both valley covers, 10 liter and 8 liter.
Okay.
I have, let's see, what else?
Kick rails?
Pardon me?
The side rails?
Yeah, I got tooling for both of those, and a holding machining fixture for both. I've got raw stock in here, and I have some finished ones here too.
Okay. He says, is all casting done at Foundry Works?
Not all of it. I have my breather tooling is over at where's it at? It's in Torrance area over there. But I got the quick disconnect breathers. I have finished product here, but I mean the tooling is over there. I'm trying to think of what Allcast. Allcast Foundry has the breather tooling. And I don't know what else they have that's Arias stuff.
They must have a lot of storage at these places.
You can't believe what they have. They have it hanging on the walls, numbered, and all parted out of that. What else you looking for?
Who's doing the machine work?
Well, for the blocks, keep in mind that several of the machine shops have closed since all this started. Ron Partain machine was doing the heads and the manifolds, and now they're gone. I've had the small pieces like the restrictor plugs and all of that stuff for the inside the block. That's the company over here in Gardena. I'm trying to think of what his name. It's a small deal. They're very pricey, but they do custom work, and that's got to be the stuff that I got done had to be done that way. But the blocks and are done by Alan Root, believe it or not.
Is he on here?
He's in Ventura.
Oh wow. Okay, I didn't even know where shop was.
Yeah, well, he's moving, so he's moving to. He's already taken a lease out in a place over there in. I think Carson City, and he'll be over there before and I have blocks in the works right now.
Oh wow!
That's for customers in Canada that I'm making blocks for, and they're putting batten heads on the blocks that I'm making, but they're calling out for the new higher tensile strength cylinder sleeves. It's the 2017, the DDI 2017. That's the spec. And that's cylinder sleeves that have 140% higher tensile strength for top fuel.
Oh wow!
So I had to order those, but they're not cheap. They're 150 a piece.
I was going to say.
Net cost 150 each.
Man.
So I had to order a bunch of those.
And everything is, from what I understand, the earlier blocks, the sleeves were the same as a 481 Rodec. Or is that not true? Because apparently you could call them and get a 481 Rodec 25 or 30 bucks cheaper a piece than if you told them it was for a Arias motor back in the day. Now it's all custom anyway.
It doesn't make any difference because you, like I say, for the Century block you got to notch them. It's all custom. The sleeves are for an Arias for the blocks that I make. They're basically 6/900 long now, and there's no notches in the bottom of them. Then the flanges are 4/875, and then the flats are 4/835, and then the thickness of it is 350 high on the flange. I don't put O-rings in them. I had to, because I don't know what head they're running. Everybody has a different chamber. I mean, 143 cc chamber was the last Hemi, Chevy, and big block 310 liter. The chamber I have on my billet heads is 125 cc chamber now. So I mean, it's that. So I mean, that's what I have. I run for my billet heads, I run a 2.500 intake and 1.940 exhaust.
They're 2.5s.
Yeah.
Okay.
I won't run a 2.6 stupid. It's no common sense at that at all whatsoever. You've not gained a damn thing.
Yeah, that's what almost all of them are now. Some of the nitro guys are running 1.5s or 2.5s and 2.4s, from what I understand. But most of the later model stuff is all 2.6. Billet parts. What do you have for billet design? Well, you have heads.
Well, I have billet heads, but the company that made them for me, which was the former Fontana Incorporated company back east in Ohio, Brownsburg to be exact, went under.
Yeah.
So all my tooling, all my holding fixtures and everything I paid for, the drawings, everything are gone. So I lost.
Because I remember they had, even Steve said they had like 3 or 4 sets of black anodized heads that were in the pictures, and then next thing you know, everybody's fired and they're all gone. The machinist guy, I can't remember what his name.
He went to work for Bob Miner.
Oh. Oh man. Yeah.
Rick Paradis is the other guy.
Yeah, Rick.
And he went back with the other company because they were building the circle track engine, the 4-cylinder Chevy 2 version of the Fontana, and he was working for them, and so I had him make the heads. And so I got screwed out of all of that money involved in that. Plus the guy who managed the deal, I mean, I got waylaid on these heads, I mean, big time.
I guess they just sold them to somebody that came to the shop and it all walked off.
Well, I know who the guys were. They're out of Kentucky.
Yeah.
I know all those guys.
Yeah.
They bought some parts from me and then copied them. They made a copy of a 10-liter block out of billet, and nothing is straight in the thing. The gears don't match up properly, and they copied the gears, and they're out of concentric. They're not concentric with each other. They're spinning bearings in the box and everything else. There's all kinds of crap going on. See, the thing with billet, what guys don't understand is that you got to heat treat that block. You have to anneal it and heat treat it. You know, before you do anything like that, and this is what they don't get. So I mean, to me, it's, you can pay 11 grand for a block. Mine are less, but I mean, the bottom line is mine, I think, are better. And so far, it's proven to me that the guys running them and giving me back the feedback on the stuff, it's proven to me that it's all good stuff. So it's all.
I know all Allen's motors, the top fuel stuff at least, are either machined and they're heat treated and they're finished machined when they're done.
Yeah.
So sells a crap load of them. Of course, they blow them up every 2 minutes.
Well, that's the choices you make when you get into the performance industry and the business and the racing part of it. This is why I decided to make parts and not build motors. I don't want to build any motors. I'm not interested, and I don't have that interest.
There's any money in that. You buy parts from everybody to assemble a motor.
Well, here's the deal. I mean, to me, you got to dry assemble and see everything is right and everything fits, and what doesn't fit and isn't right, you as an engine builder make it work, and you know the intricacies of what takes place and in which to do that. For the money that you get out of building the engine twice and then being responsible for it after it leaves your shop, and then they need to have tuning issues or whatever issues, it's not worth it.
Somebody leaves the oil out of it or whatever.
I've had that happen twice, working for Arias. Out of the blower or out of the engine, either one. I've had it, yes.
Well,
I got a blower where the gears cooked, the rotors, impellers are junk, And the guy's jumping up and down, you no good MFs and this and that and everything else, and that's really just bad. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
I don't want any
You
part
know
of that.
what oil is?
Yeah.
$1.98 would have cured it. Wow.
So it's all that. What else you got going?
Who's doing the billet fab work?
Well,
That would be.
the manifolds that I've had made for my own Hemi Chevy, I mean, I had a guy that had a business in Palmdale, Lancaster area, and he got so flaky I ended up having the guy who drives my Bonneville car, he's a hell of a craftsman and a welder, and he finished the manifold for me, because it has an intercooler in the plenum. So I had a nice part made by this guy.
No doubt.
So.
Wow. I don't know what he means by this. Vendor list of purchased components.
Well, okay. Basically, the rocker arm assemblies. I have T&D make them for me, because if I die tomorrow, there's a source. Okay. The 10-liter stuff. I have the molds for the 10-liter rocker arms. They're investment cast, and they fit on the same shaft, you know, the same oiling system and the same deal. But I have the drawings for the stands. I have not made any stands for the 10-liter or any rockers for the 10-liter, but I have the tooling here in my garage for them. I have the holding fixtures for the 8.3-liter here that you set the block up when you start your process. I have that.
Says, are you building any of the new Hemi Chevy parts?
Yes.
Okay.
I have new castings in the foundry as we speak. I have T&D already has made several sets of my Hemi Chevy rocker arm assemblies. I've made a new valve cover for that head as well because of the taller requirement. And I also have new spark plug tubes that are longer. So I have that. I don't have anything other than that at this point, which is the heads, the rockers, the valve covers, and the gaskets that are made for that pair of heads. I have not yet made a manifold for the Hemi Chevy.
Now, is he talking about the one that Nick was making, the new style?
I have
big block tire?
Yeah, I have the new style fat head being made. It's a duplicate of that only.
Oh, okay.
It's only because the people who purchased the Hemi Chevy inventory came to town and picked up all the inventory. I was asked to leave Arias by that time, and Steve Montrelli handled that deal. But as it worked itself out, Montrelli also sold a head package or a complete engine to somebody here in the Sacramento area, and it went to an engine builder there in Stockton, and I started getting phone calls because the builder didn't know what he had his hands into. And the guy who purchased all this stuff referred him to me for information because he knew nothing about the product at all.
Oh, wow.
He loaded everything in a truck and took it all back home and doesn't even know what he owns. Yet, then he calls me for a list of all the parts and pieces, and I said, well, I have the list, but I think you're dealing with Steve Montrelli. And he says, well, Steve said you had all this stuff. And I says, well, yes, because I managed the company for all these years, and I do have copies. Well, can I have those copies? I says, well, I guess you can. I says, you know, but I'd like to know that if I can buy something from you. Well, we'll talk about it later. Well, later came and he says, no, I've decided that I don't want anybody out here on the West Coast. I'll sell it myself. I says, okay, no problem. So I decided to make my own head, and that's what I'm doing. And I've heard stories since that's happened that he says you can only buy Hemi Chevy heads from me, and I'm the only distributor, and I have all the rights, and I have this and I have that. And I said, really? I said, well, there's no patents on it for one. I offered to sell it for you for two, and if you're not willing to work with me, what do you expect me to do? I was there for 19 years or 20 years of my time. I'm certainly going to do what I'm going to do, and you can do whatever you think you need to do. Because anyway, he called the Arias company back, talked to Michelle Arias, or not Arias, but Michelle. And bottom line was that they weren't going to do anything for him. They were done with him. Then he started saying he was things were taken from the inventory, this, that, and everything else. I said, well, I know nothing about that because I was not there. I was asked to leave. So that's not my issue. You need to talk to whomever you were dealing with. So
that's weird they would call you about it.
Well, because they don't know how to put stuff together. The heads were solid in most cases for the 8.3 and the 10 liter. The water jacketed heads on the 10 liter. I have water jacketed heads too. They're identically the same head. Yeah. So I mean, so I got both water jackets for the 10 liter and also, but you don't need that for the 8.3. They're all solid head, solid block. Yeah. But I mean, what you have access to is a market for a water jacketed head for the 10 liter. Also, you have a water jacketed head for the Hemi Chevy, the valve cover tooling for the Hemi Chevy. It's expanded a limited market to a bigger market. The street market is ripe and ready. I mean, I've got calls from companies back east who build custom rods that want Hemi heads for these things.
But if you look at it, it's like, that's a totally different animal.
Well, the thing I'm going to share with you is that the Hemi Chevy had two different spark plug tube angles. The 3-push rod Hemi Chevy had a spark plug tube that was vertically inserted into the head 90 degrees from the deck. And because the valve cover had cast in spark plug tube, didn't have the standard old school spark plug tube. It was cast in and you sealed it with a gasket.
Oh, I see.
So that's how you did that with it. And so the so that's how that was.
Yeah, I've never even seen one of them.
Yeah, well, you get some of that. In fact, the matter is, what we did is that we had some what was it? The lifter bore angles I have. Okay, I got like on a Chrysler, they're 45 degrees intake and exhaust. The Chevrolet is 39 degrees intake, 45 degrees exhaust. 10 liter is 10 degrees from being perfectly horizontal. The 8.3 is all 49 degrees intake and exhaust. That part I know. He wanted the valve links. He wanted, I got the links for him. I got, with my 2400 Manley stuff that I run, and they're 5/640 long. But it's, they're, 11/32 stem. And then, the exhauster basically 5-inch 110 long on the exhauster, 1940, like I say, 2400. But that,
you were talking about an engine that your friend designed, a Mole.
Oh, Rudy Moeller?
Moeller, yeah.
Oh yeah, Rudy Moeller designed the Moeller engine, one off, only one was ever built. But he knew all about the pattern work and castings and everything else, got it all done. The people who bought it from the estate of Rudy Moeller's was Don Ferguson. And he calls himself Arden Manufacturing.
I've seen.
Okay,
the old Arden or new Arden?
Well, I'm sorry to say that it's he makes the Arden head. And he also makes basically a Ford block for the Arden head. Cast block, he makes that.
Oh, wow.
He also bought from Nick Arias a 426 Chrysler, which at one time was the AA500. Arias Austin. Walt Austin was the guy who were partners on that deal.
Yeah, that was the 180
Yeah.
Disapproved after it was approved.
Well, the thing was, it had pan rails. It had when it started out, it was shoot, raised cam, standard cam, 250 raised deck, 100 raised deck.
Yeah, I think they're running that motor in A fuel right now.
Well, yes, they are. There's
Just down
because
to-
it's several guys have castings, but I mean they're no longer made anymore. In fact, Ferguson has the tooling for it. He's updated it and made it a Y block. Nick made it a first Y block, and it fits the standard Y block setup for like a KB or something like that for an oil pan. What changed was the main cap stud size, the head stud size from 1/2 inch to 9/16, and the same thing with the studs for the heads. He changed that. So, and then now, not most recently, the last 10 years, it's been, well, yeah, I'd say 10 years. He made a dry sleeve block out of it. Instead of using the Omni rings or the O-rings to seal it from water, he just made a dry sleeve block out of it. So now he's got the best of everything, but he calls it an Arden. He doesn't call it a Chrysler, he calls it an Arden. He runs it in his Bonneville cars. He's got 2 streamliners, so he runs them in both cars, and that's what he does. It's a hell of a motor. It's a nice part.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, I know they put a lot of money into that.
but they'll
thing.
take Brad heads, stage 2 heads, anybody's heads.
Oh, wow.
Chrysler stuff. But anyway, he bought that from Nick, and it ends up with we ended up with a Chevy block pattern. We thought, but it wasn't a block pattern at all. It was the beginnings of making cores for a tool to make a block is what it was. But it did not have the cope and the drag.
Wow.
So it has, you got to make a cope and you got to make a drag for it's a Chevy block. And so, but there's so many Chevy blocks out there, who in the hell wants to do that? So, I mean, it's just that kind of a deal.
Well, now, I mean, it seems like everybody's making them. You can get whatever you want.
Yeah.
Products, I mean, there's just, everybody's.
Well, the thing is that you got Donovan making them now, but they make them big cubic inch now because they make them for the military. They're 400 or 500 bore spacing, the whole thing. But they're for a special application, and it's not sold to the consumer market, it's sold to the military. But it's a big block Chevy block. They make small blocks for the sprint cars. They make a lot of that. The 410 midgets, so I mean the sprints, so they sell a ton of those blocks.
Yeah.
So it's all that too, so.
Just depends what your flavor is, I guess.
Yeah. He's a wealth of information, and he's a talented engine builder and tuner. And everything was by hand and by ear. He didn't need a computer. He could tell you when an engine fired up if it was right or wrong. And then, and he would tell you. And that's his makeup. And he worked on everything. Ford Cameras, he won 426s, 392s. He worked on stuff that Arias built that nobody even knew about, and he would make them work. I mean, when he worked on the Ford Cameras, hell, it was more like changing motors and changing parts. I mean, the things they would turn to instant junk. You know, and he was running them. I mean, he made them run. But that's what he did. It was just his capability, his talent.